Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, you've got the privilege of talking to Dorrainne today. Dorrainne's an individual from the great state of Illinois. I was introduced to her through a mutual friend, and I'm very excited to talk to her today. Sounds like we've got a lot of ground to cover. So Dorrainne, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Dorrainne, is there anything about you that we need to know right off the bat before we get into all this Bigfoot activity that's been going on?
Well, I always tell everyone that I have a head full of this stuff. So it's sometimes hard for me to keep track of everything. So I try to keep it linear, but sometimes I get off on tangents. So it's just, the reason for that is just, I've been at this for so long, since I was 9, and there's just so much to cover. I've had many encounters. I know a lot of people have had one single encounter. I have ongoing encounters. So there's so much in my head that sometimes I lose track of what I'm talking about. So that would be my biggest thing that somebody should know about me. First off, I seem a little weird. So
that's all right. Hey, we're all a little weird, I think, that's listening to this. So I love that. So in this one, guys, you will be hearing probably a lot of me as well. Per the pre-interview, Dorrainne would be a little bit more comfortable with it, a more guided experience. So Dorrainne, first, would you mind sharing what part of Illinois, and maybe not giving away too much, but are we looking at northern or southern, or what area of Illinois are we looking at?
I am in the central part of the state where a lot of rivers intersect here, the Illinois River and some other smaller rivers around here. It's very, very forested in a lot of areas. I live in a small city here, and the city itself is forested quite a bit on the side that I'm on, and there's a huge creek that runs through my neighborhood. I actually live in the city, and a lot of these experiences have taken place here in the urban area. So that's what I found fascinating about this, is that I realized that they're not just out in the country or in the wilderness. They're everywhere, including my city. So I'll be talking a lot about that.
That's awesome. Central Illinois is definitely in the, I would say, if there's the Bigfoot news or what people are looking at, it's got a focus on it for the last few months. There's been at least one sighting in, let's see, it was southwest of Peoria along the Illinois River.
Yes, that's very close to where I am.
Okay.
And I would say people have argued with me on this, but I would say that Illinois probably has as many Bigfoot, as much population as the state of Oregon. I would say that very boldly because I've seen them everywhere here.
Wow. It's a bold statement, but I mean, if you take Southern Illinois into consideration, that alone is absolutely wild down there.
It's here around the rivers and the woods. It's perfect habitat for them. But it's interesting how they get into the urban areas and they seem to thrive here. A lot of people don't believe me, but I've seen things myself, but there's a different way of seeing them that's interesting, and I want to talk about that too. So
Absolutely. Well,
and,
Dorrainne, take us back to the very beginning when all this started, when you first started having interaction with these creatures.
it was about 5 or 6 years ago that I actually started interacting with them. Let's see, it would have been 2016, 2017, something like that. My entire life, I had always known they were there, kind of like I was always hiking. I was always in the woods. Even when I was a little kid, I was always walking in the woods because we lived in a small town near the river. Always out in the woods, and I was always aware that I was being watched all the time. And years later, I ended up getting a divorce, and I was trying to find a way to find some peace inside my mind because, divorce is not easy. And I started walking the woods again in my area. And I started getting a sense that they definitely were still there, that something was there anyway. I wasn't thinking so consciously that it was Bigfoot, but I was just aware that there was something watching me all the time. You know that feeling when you think you're being watched. It's intuitive. We're kind of taught that our intuition doesn't mean anything, but it definitely does, because it's that feeling of angst, like there's something there, you can't see it, but it's there. But anyway, I started looking for evidence. I started getting into Bigfoot a little bit. I was writing articles for a website, and I was kind of getting into a mindset where I was really thinking about the subject more. And I wrote articles for several years before I really started looking for evidence of what I knew was already there. And I started finding footprints and stick structures, what they call stick structures, those TP structures, and they do weaving of branches and things like that, and they do glyphs, wood structures on the ground and things like that. I started finding those, lots and lots of footprints in a particular area on the Sangamon River here, and realized that there really was something to it. So I'd kind of toyed with the idea of Bigfoot. It was just kind of in the back of my mind for my entire life, practically, ever since the Patterson-Gimlin film, back in 1967. Yeah, I'm old, but anyway, I was finding physical evidence of them everywhere. I mean, in the area I was looking, there were footprints all over the place. And these were public areas where other people could see them, except they weren't looking at them. They were people just walking around everywhere, hiking the trails. And I'm like, don't people see these? Because they're obvious footprints. And I was getting deeper and deeper into it and finding all kinds of things, learning a lot. But the experience was mostly a physical experience for the most part. And I had a feeling like they were trying to connect with me. And I hate to always talk about feelings so much, but when you're actually really into Bigfoot, I mean, really into the truth of what they are, you kind of venture out of the physical realm and into the kind of metaphysical realm. And you start to realize that there's a reality beyond the one we can see and feel and touch. And this is what they teach you. The Bigfoot teach you this. because in order to connect with them, you have to let go of the idea of the physical. Now, I know that a lot of people have had physical encounters, of course, but I can talk a little bit more about why that's the case. And this is what the Bigfoot themselves have told me in recent years. I've had mind speak conversations. Mind speak is just telepathy. If people don't realize what it is, it's just telepathy. It's real. And they've told me certain things about what they're doing, but there was a lot that led up to that. When I realized that there was a metaphysical experience going on, like the reason I knew that was I knew they were there, and it was getting to the point where I felt like they were trying to connect with me because it felt like they were getting closer to me. Like I could almost feel them. I don't want to say breathing down my neck, but it was almost like that. Like they really wanted to let me know they were there. So I'm a wildlife photographer. I was always out in the woods at that point, and I was just out there taking pictures and walking the woods and walking around along the water and things like that. And there was just a weird feeling at one point, like they were really trying to connect with me, and I started talking to them. And I just said, I know you're here. I can't see you, but I know you're here. And I wish that you would show me something that tells me that you want to connect with me, that you want to communicate with me, or if it's okay if I do with you. And nothing happened for the longest time. I just kept walking the woods and taking pictures, and nothing really happened for a little while. And then out of the blue, all of a sudden, I started finding really elaborate structures on my trail. I would find feathers sticking out of the ground. They would put like a round glyph, like a circle. They'd put a feather in the middle of it. Feathers were a big one. They'd put feathers everywhere. I actually went into a porta potty one day when I was out there, and they had stuck one in there for me to find, which I thought was crazy. But anyway, they were sticking them where they knew I would be. It's almost like they knew where I was going before I went there. And one day I found a little structure. They had taken a Barbie doll head and stuck it on the end of a stick and stuck it in the ground. And there was a little circle of rocks around it. And the Barbie doll head, I'm a blonde, and the Barbie doll head, of course, is blonde. And I knew immediately that was a communication. But it was just the funniest thing because they do seem to have kind of a sense of humor about what they do. But every time I went out there, I was like out there every day for quite a while because it was getting more and more interesting. I was finding more things. And I was out there every day, and they would leave me something. But the Barbie doll head was one of the most interesting things that I ever found. I knew that was directed at me.
Was there also a time when you had like a physical, like you got close to one in the physical form, or you're like, there's one really close? Because I think I've found that close interaction can almost jumpstart a person looking at this completely different and experiencing mind speak or things like that. Is that anything that happened to you?
I've seen them in the physical several times, but there wasn't a physical experience that really got me. That's what really bugs people who don't believe in the metaphysical aspects, is that I've never really had a serious physical encounter. It's always been, I can feel them there. I know they're there. You know, it's like, I know there's something there. It's like a person is standing behind you, but you turn around and there's nothing there. But it's just the weirdest thing. They really teach you that reality is not what we think it is. And I'll get into that more as we go, because they did explain that to me to a certain extent. But they just teach you that reality is different than what we've been taught. And you really realize that what we're taught really is really wrong. It's all incorrect. We've been taught everything incorrect, including the implementation of logic. We don't use logic in the right way at all. Logic is too subjective, and that's a whole other topic for another day. But they just, if you let them, they gradually make you understand that there's a whole different reality on a different plane that we haven't been seeing. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to show it to you in bite-sized pieces, because there's a lot that people can't handle. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So there have been times when you have had a visual sighting of one?
There have been many visual sightings, but only a few that were really clear enough that I could say, that was a physical encounter. They actually run in and out between metaphysical and physical. They can be like half and half sometimes. It's weird. You can see half of one, and like at the top half, like it's that Bigfoot type shape. You can see the silhouette, the form of it, but then there's no bottom. Like part of them is not there. And people have tried to use that to debunk what I'm saying all the time, but you have to understand, we've been looking for these beings for, since 1967. And we haven't really found that much. But the people who do the research know that they exist. And we have found footprints and other physical evidence. We just can't get a clear picture of them. Okay, here's a weird explanation for why. Is they are a metaphysical being. They're paranormal and they're also physical. And that's what we have to wrap our minds around. They're not normal, they're not an animal like what we're always looking for cryptids, the unknown animals like the Loch Ness Monster, whatever. We're always looking for them to be what we think they should be, a physical being. But when you're dealing with Bigfoot, you're not dealing with a fully physical being. I mean, they are physical, and yet they can become non-physical. And that's what people can't wrap their minds around. And that's what they're trying to teach us, that this is actually possible. It's the whole explanation for why we're not finding them like, the other cryptids that we found over the years. We're not finding these at all because they're different. And they have told me they come from someplace else. So they're aliens, basically. They're not from here. So that gets very interesting too. I haven't got a detailed explanation of where they are from, but the thing is, if anybody's familiar with the idea that they are human, the DNA study where they found out that they're half human and half alien. Okay, this was a real study that was done. And the thing is, they're related to us in that respect. They have human DNA. Okay, people were finding what they thought was Bigfoot DNA, and they take it into an analyst, and they find out it's human. Well, they're related to us. So yes, it's coming up human. That was the explanation of why we could never get Bigfoot DNA. Okay, it's human DNA is what it is. It's only slightly different than ours. But anyway, they are related to us. And what is really strange, and I know I'm getting off on a tangent here, but what's really strange is that if they're human, if that's really true, then the abilities that they have, we also have the potential for. So this is when you get into the quantum aspects of them. They are actually quantum in nature.
How would you break that down for a person who has never heard that terminology before in relation to Bigfoot?
Okay. To me, quantum just means we don't understand it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. We don't really understand it. But okay, so this dealing with them, trying to understand them better with the information that they were giving me to kind of help me, I was kind of forced to learn a little bit about quantum physics and basically how reality actually works, and not the way we've been taught that everything works. We've been taught that this is a physical world. We can see everything, and everything we can see is what's real. And of course, that's not true at all. There is a whole other plane of existence, many planes of existence actually, that exist. And there are all kinds of other beings that exist beyond, beyond what we can perceive. So what we're experiencing on a daily basis is not all there is. And as far as I'm concerned, the Bigfoot are proof of that. But, it's really hard to prove this to other people who don't understand how reality really does work. It's all a matter of, as Nikola Tesla said, energy, frequency, and vibration. If you think in terms of energy, everything starts to make sense. All their existence starts to make sense. The biggest complaint people have is about Bigfoot is the woo aspect, where, there are some people who believe they can cloak and they can do all these amazing, interesting things. They can make themselves invisible. They can blend in with anything. They can levitate, all this kind of stuff. All of that comes from what I'm talking about: energy, frequency, and vibration. Energy is what everything is. Everything consists of energy. There's nothing really solid that exists. It's all a matter of the frequency, the vibration of something. Like a lower vibration. A solid object is a lower vibrating thing, whereas a higher vibration can become almost invisible. Like, it's kind of like a ceiling fan. Once you turn it up high, okay, you got it on low and you can still see the blades, but you turn it up higher, the blades kind of disappear. And Bigfoot exists at an extremely high vibration. And if we don't match that frequency, we're not going to see anything. We're not going to have any kind of experience with them. We can only have the lower frequency experience, which is the physical experience. And that's what a lot of people have had, was the lower frequency experience. They had to see the physical in order to say, hey, you know what? I didn't believe in these things before, but now I've seen one, and now I do believe. But it takes a little more doing.
Logically, the question I should be asking is, if they then are on a higher frequency, then how do we jump up to that if possible?
Well, I'm glad you asked that.
I'm sure.
Okay, so this brought me to the idea of, how do I meet them where they are? What's a possible way for me to meet them where they are? And I started meditating to raise my frequency. And got to the point where I was meditating a couple hours a day, which was ridiculous when I think about it now, because I don't do that now. But at the time, I was determined that I was going to figure out how to find them where they were, rather than trying to get them to come to me in the physical. I was going to try to figure out how I could find them. But I'd taken pictures out there in the woods, and I was taking pictures of anytime I had a feeling or heard a twig snap, I would snap a picture in that direction. And I was studying these pictures, trying to see them, and I wasn't seeing anything. And I had a friend who was more into the metaphysical aspects than I was, and she was good at seeing them. And don't ask me why I thought she was good at seeing them, because I don't know. She just seemed to have a sense, like I did, that they were right there, but she could see them better than I could. And she's like, look right there at that shape. Now, it's cloaking, it's standing right there behind you. And I'm like, well, I could feel it right behind me, but I wasn't, I never saw anything. But anyway, she was kind of teaching me how to start seeing them. And you could see what she was talking about. It wasn't like I thought she was, full of it and just making stuff up, because she was very serious about her own research, and she'd been doing it for many years. And there was a lot of physical evidence. She had a lot of proof. They had given her gifts, and, she was fairly credible to me. And I was always kind of a logic person in the early days. So for me to take that leap of faith with her was a pretty big deal. But anyway, she was teaching me what to look for in these pictures. And after a while, you start to see. Now, when you're seeing all these things, you're also looking for the physical evidence in that spot. Okay. So there's all kinds of physical evidence, but I'm not seeing anything. But I'm swearing that they're right there with me. Like I can feel them right there. And anyway, the experience is becoming more intense, because I'm looking at these pictures and now I can see shapes. I mean, these are the classic Bigfoot shapes. And sometimes I can even see expressions on their faces. I can see, that they're very, very close to me, or they didn't want to get too close to me. I was just starting to see in these pictures that there was definitely something there, because I would take the picture and I would be looking at what I thought was nothing. But I would hold the camera up and I'm looking at the screen on the back of the camera, and I don't see anything with my naked eye. I don't see anything right there in front of me, but I look at the camera, the screen on the back of the camera, and I can see all kinds of shapes, dark shapes. Okay, I put the camera down and I look with my naked eye. Those dark shapes aren't there. I put the camera back up and look through the screen again. There they are again, the shapes. And there's a density to the shapes. It's like there's something there, but it's kind of blurry. You know, we always joke about the blurry photos. Bigfoot is blurry, people. They are.
That is fascinating. Was that a digital? Sorry, was that a digital camera or?
Yeah, this was a professional camera. This was a digital camera.
Okay.
And it works with any camera I've used, but I can look at a spot where I think I know they are because I can feel them. And I look at that spot, I don't really see anything. Sometimes I see something now, but that's an evolution there. That's evolved over time. But
does that work? Sorry, does that work with a cell phone as well in your?
Yes, that's what I'm using now all the time.
Oh, wow.
Any kind of digital, I don't know if film cameras work the same. I've never tried that. But any camera I've used in the last few years has done the same thing. I will look at that spot in the bushes and I might not see a single thing. And I think, well, you know, there's nothing here, but it's weird because I feel something here. You know, it's just a weird feeling. So I go ahead and I take the picture. I just got in the habit of going ahead, taking the picture, even though I thought there was nothing there. And when I got home, I would see all kinds of things that were not there when I was actually looking at it. That was one of the first things I noticed. And my friend who was helping me with this, she's like, yep, that's how it works. That's how it works. They are there, but somehow the camera picks them up when your eye does not. And I wasn't really surprised that my eye couldn't see anything. But that's when I got into the whole idea of the third eye and the pineal gland. And learned about that, which a lot of people don't think really exists, but the pineal gland does exist. The third eye is responsible for your psychic sensory responses, your psychic vision.
I want to throw a hypothetical at you real quick. And I'm gonna have to be really careful how I say it. So let's say, because fluoride calcifies that, right?
It does, but I've been told that no, hypothetically, actually they say it does.
Okay.
I'm trying to eliminate fluoride from my diet and everything. But
what if, let's say hypothetically, if a nation was to get fluoride, take fluoride out of its water supply, could that then mean that there could be an uptick and a whole lot of Bigfoot sightings, or am I jumping ahead?
No, you're not jumping ahead at all.
Okay.
Actually, what I was going to get into was with the pineal gland, however you pronounce it. Basically, it all goes with the whole frequency thing I was talking about. Okay, you can't really see anything that you're not a vibrational match to. But what the pineal gland does is it opens gradually. It doesn't pop open like some people claim it does. It doesn't pop open. It opens gradually. You cannot deal with a lot of things that your third eye would see if it just popped open. It might scare the crap out of you, what you would see. So what's happening is the Earth right now is going through a area of the galaxy that is higher vibrational. So the entire planet's vibration is rising right now. And we were in the third dimension. We're now kind of entering into the fourth dimensional densities. We're kind of moving up. We're not quite to the fifth dimension yet, but we're in the fourth, and if you haven't noticed, there's more paranormal sightings than ever before. People are starting to see things.
Yeah, this last year has been nuts. I mean, just think about it, right? Like the whole Miami Mall thing, whatever that was.
Right. Yes, exactly. Stuff like that. All the UFO sightings. I mean, many, many more UFO sightings and all this other stuff. And people just basically awakening and all of a sudden realize, we're being lied to about everything, And that kind of awakening is from pineal glands opening, but it's partly from us raising collectively to a higher vibration. The higher you vibrate, the more that you're going to see. The more you're going to start understanding that reality isn't quite what it was in third density. So people, I've warned for years that people are going to start seeing things that they never thought existed. And this is the paranormal, all the sightings, Bigfoot sightings, everything sightings that are going on. There's a reality, there's a plane of reality that we're entering into that's a higher vibration. So we're all starting to see more. But I was working on this before any of this happened to any great degree. And I was starting to understand that between the pineal gland and my vibration, trying to keep my vibration high, my experiences became more evolved, intense, more. There was a different reality unfolding for me. And I was starting to understand that there was a lot more to everything than what I'd ever known before. I mean, I just basically operated like any other human on the planet, What's real is what I can see. But when you start getting up on that higher plane, things start looking different. It becomes, I don't want to say clearer because Bigfoot is still kind of blurry for me, but I feel like they're going to get clearer for me over time. And I think that anyone could have that experience if their vibration is high. And I don't know that you have to meditate all the time to do that like I did, but having a higher vibration puts you into a totally different reality. And people try to tell me that reality doesn't exist. They try to gaslight me, say, you're crazy. They're just an ape. They're just a wood ape. There's nothing more to this. But they're not having the same experience that I am. They're not having the same perceptions of it that I am. They're not operating at that higher vibration. They're not meditating for 2 hours a day, operating at that higher vibration. They're not having the same experience I am. And yet they're trying to tell me what I'm seeing and what I'm not seeing. And I'm telling you that we can't be invalidating people's experiences because with the vibration of the entire planet rising, third eye's opening, everyone's opening at a different speed because it opens at the level that they can understand and handle. It doesn't give you more than you can handle. So it's opening at the rate of speed that you can deal with, and you will start to see, and I'm not saying you're going to see Bigfoot in your backyard, but you're going to start to see reality itself in a totally different way. The weirdest thing that came up for me was the elementals, the little beings in my bushes in the front yard. It's like you're going on a trip because you're seeing things that you never knew were there. It's like, these things always been here? Yeah, they probably have, but you couldn't see them. And Bigfoot is one of those things. So
it's so interesting. It's because it sounds like to me, if I'm hearing it right, is that it's gonna, there's no stopping. Is it? So if we're going through a part of the galaxy where stuff is it's affecting us, then the sightings are going to get more and more and more because it's just starting to affect everything on the planet. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I'm guessing, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm guessing that eventually, if we all live long enough to see it, we're going to find that we're living side by side with many beings that we didn't used to know were there. And they've been there the whole time. They haven't heard anything, they haven't done any significant damage. The Bigfoot are pretty much harmless to us. Although I know there are bad ones, but basically the experience I have here in town is that they are everywhere. I have dogmen here. I have elementals here. These little between 3 and 4 foot beings I call wild folk. I do not know what they are. And then the Bigfoot. But I can go down the hill from my house every morning. There's a T in the road. I go down there to the T. I sit there for a minute and I can see them across the street sitting there. They're all squatted down in squatting position. I'll see a bunch of dogmen over here. I'll see a family of Bigfoot over here. I mean, it's crazy. And I realize that I sound like a lunatic because you have to know what I was like before. I was very hell-bent on science and logic, because I thought the only way to prove to everyone that these things exist is we've got to prove all this stuff scientifically. And there came a time when I just knew that I didn't care anymore whether or not I prove they exist or not. I'm talking to you on here. I don't care if anybody believes me or not.
Mm-hmm.
This is the experience that I've had, and this is the explanation I'm giving you. The whole vibration thing explains why some people see them and some people don't. Some people do not vibrationally match the metaphysical experience. If you don't believe that they exist metaphysically, which a lot of people don't, they're never going to see one. Now, what the Bigfoot themselves have told me is that if someone is meant to have an awakening in this lifetime, quite often the Bigfoot will show themselves to that person in the physical, if that is what they need to see. Some people are so stuck in logic and science that they have to see something in the physical before they'll believe in it, before they'll awaken. Because, a Bigfoot sighting just throws people into a tizzy. It's almost like post-traumatic stress. Something they didn't really believe in, all of a sudden now they've seen it in the flesh and they can't deny it anymore.
Right.
But the Bigfoot also told me that people like me that don't need to have that physical experience will have the metaphysical experience of them. And I don't know if you know about empaths, very much about empaths.
I mean, I've heard the word come up in interviews, but let's pretend that I don't.
Okay. Empaths are people who are especially sensitive to stimuli. And they feel other people's feelings. They kind of, like, when they walk into a room, they can look at everybody and tell how they're feeling at that moment. They're highly sensitive to energy.
Yeah.
There are a lot of empaths. You hear more about this subject. When I was a kid, you never heard the word empath ever. But now it keeps coming up, and some people are kind of irritated that it keeps coming up. It's like everybody identifies as an empath. How stupid is that? But it's really actually happening for a reason. There are more empaths incarnating here right now. And empaths are just people who are closer to their psychic abilities than other people are. That sensitivity that they have, that they often think is a horrible curse, is actually their psychic abilities trying to come out. We are actually capable of all kinds of psychic abilities. And they're actually coming to the surface because of this, because the planet is moving into a higher vibrational area of the galaxy. So we're starting to wake up, and we're starting to find out that we're capable of much more than we ever thought we were. So the empaths are actually just psychics in training. And they will more than likely be teaching this to others. But the Bigfoot told me that this is actually happening for the purpose of awakening. And I know it sounds crazy, but they are responsible for helping us awaken. I mean, can you imagine anything better to wake you up than to see a Bigfoot walk across your path?
Yeah, I mean, if that doesn't wake you up, then you're pretty asleep.
Yeah.
Does this explain how you could have some researchers where they have done this for 40 years and they never have any type of like visual interaction?
Right. They haven't. Well, some people could say I haven't had any visual interaction. If I haven't seen them in the full physical form, which I've seen them pretty close to the full physical form, but they think if you haven't seen it in the full physical form, what were we talking about? What was the question?
So I'll just share a little story. I went out to Oregon this summer, and I went to a place in the woods 30 miles out that was well known for having visuals, and like crazy stuff happened, right? And so I was there multiple times, and sometimes there was a person with us that was just like, let me see the tracks. I don't care about anything else. Nothing happened. But when you had the people there that were like totally open to stuff, we were seeing things like people communicate with some sort of fake bird noise and communication back and forth within half a second, and like just crazy stuff was happening. So, I think it depends on what kind of person is present in these situations.
Yeah, there are people that can be out in the woods for 40 years and swear that they've never seen a Bigfoot and nothing weird has ever happened. And the rest of us are all crazy. It's because they are, like you said, not really open to the idea. It's important to be open to the idea. Now, a lot of people would say that being open to something doesn't make it real. But you know what you experienced. That other person does not. And I think we need to stop invalidating people's experiences, because what they're seeing, what everybody sees, is filtered through their perceptions. Okay, our eyes are not what we think they are. They're just lenses. They're not telling us anything. They're just lenses, like a lens on a camera. What actually happens is there's this visual cortex on the back of our heads that's actually perceiving information, and that information is filtered through our perceptions. Like, it's based on what kind of experiences we've had in life. Some people have seen something scary in their life and they don't want to see anything else that's scary. So they'll block out everything on purpose. Their brain is actually doing it because their brain knows that they can't handle anything else like that. Some people are not capable of handling what's out there. I see it all the time, but a lot of people can't even begin to entertain the idea that there might be this 8 to 10 foot hairy monstrous being, and they're not monsters by any stretch, but they look monstrous. Can't even imagine, they can't even fathom the idea that there might be this huge hairy being right outside watching them. And it's even worse if they think they can't see this being out there. It's horrifying. Now, I've just gotten used to them hanging around. I know they're there. They're hanging around. They don't bother anything. The ones that come up into my bedroom are kind of looking after me. And that's another thing that people can't accept. I've got pictures of footprints in my carpet. I keep a particular kind of carpet in my bedroom, and they'll leave me footprints to let me know they're there. They don't hurt anything. And actually, I think it's good for them to be here because they seem very protective. It's very protective energy, but they're walking around in my bedroom at night. I hear footsteps. There was a few months ago, I had a switch in personnel. They switch around the individuals that come in. They'll kind of hang out with me every night for a while, and then they'll switch to another one. Okay, I got another female that was coming in here every night. She was new. I hadn't had her in here before. Different energy. She had a little baby, and she also had a toddler age child with her, because I was finding little tiny footprints and bigger footprints, and then her footprints, which were the full, I don't know, 12 to 14 inches. But anyway, they were coming in here. They were fairly new at hanging out here with me, and I talked to her. I had a sense of what her name was. I had a help from a friend who's a psychic that helped me with the name, and I knew her name was Stella. Okay, so I heard a noise. I heard the floor squeak. I've got several spots in the floor that squeak. And I heard the floor squeak, and I'm like, Stella, is that you? And I just told her I was so happy she was here. I feel so safe with all of you here. And I'm very grateful that you're here. And I was talking to her about her kids, which female Bigfoot, they love their children. Oh my gosh. They are very focused on their kids. So if you talk to them about their kids, they love it. But anyway, I laid down on the bed and I thought, well, I'm not going to get any response from her. And then all of a sudden I heard the floor squeak right beside my bed. The floor doesn't squeak beside my bed unless somebody steps there. And it wasn't me stepping there. I was laying on the bed, but she stepped in that spot to let me know that she was there. I could just kind of feel her kind of leaning over the bed. But it was a very surreal experience. And she's still with me. She's been with me for a while. There was only one individual that would actually mind speak with me, and that individual is not here right now. They have a tendency to communicate with me right now through thought transference. They transfer ideas over to me, ideas that I would never have myself in a million years pop into my head. That's thought transference.
How do you tell the difference between those two things?
Yes, it's all of a sudden a thought will pop into your head and you have no idea where it came from. It's not something that you would think on your own.
Mm-hmm.
That's transference. But anyway, that's how they communicate with me at the moment. It could change at any time. But
mind speak would be you hear a totally different voice, right?
Not only that, not only do you hear a voice, but a lot of times telepathy for me is I'll be scrolling through social media, YouTube or something like that. I will ask a question. I asked the one who used to speak to me, Sarah, she was another female. I asked her what her mate's name was because I did not know. She has a very tall mate. He looks like he's, 12 feet tall. Anyway, I asked her what his name was, and I was kind of wondering to myself how she was going to tell me this. Sometimes I hear it in my head, but this time it was scrolled across YouTube, the side page of YouTube. It said Stefano. The name Stefano came up. And I'm like, is that it? And I'm like, yeah, I think that's it, Stefano. And yeah, that's his name, Stefano. That's her mate. And it came up on the screen. It happens a lot that way. I'll see a sign as I'm going down the road. That'll be my answer. I'll passing the TV and I'll hear a phrase come up on the TV. That's my answer. Telepathy works in interesting ways, but that's how she would communicate with me. And I wish she would communicate with me now, but there's some reason she won't. She just had a baby, I know, and she had a very difficult birth. So I think she's recouping. Hopefully she'll talk to me in the future, but a lot of times I've been wondering if they were still here, and I would ask them if they're still here, before I go to bed at night. I'm like, are you guys still here? I think I can feel you, but I'm not sure. And anyway, they would leave me footprints in places that I don't leave footprints. But you can tell a Bigfoot footprint from a human footprint. I have an arch foot. They have a very flat foot. And I don't run around barefoot. I've broken a toe several times, so I don't ever run around barefoot, ever, hardly. And they're the only ones who run around in my room barefoot. And I have her footprints and the baby. She'll put the baby down. I've had footprints in my closet where the kids have been playing in my closet. I mean, it's just, my life is so weird, but they're definitely here.
It's so interesting because, the way you look at things really plays into it, because I'm just listening to this part. And if we were talking about haunted houses, this would be looked at completely different. And those type of people would be thinking, oh, my house is haunted. These random footprints are showing up in my carpet, right? It's how you look at it. Okay, well,
here's the thing. Every house I've ever lived in my life, and I'm 61, I have lived in a lot of houses in my life, and they've all had activity in them. And it wasn't until I got to this one, it's been 7 or 8 years ago, I got to this one and I realized that those footsteps down there on the floor, on the lower level, there's hardwood floors, I could always hear footsteps down there when the house was quiet. And I'm like, what the heck is that? What is walking around? This house must be haunted. Every house I've been to that I've lived in is haunted. Okay. Now I realize that probably was not the case. It was probably them. They've been with me since I was 9 years old. I have pictures of when I was a kid where they're standing right behind me in their metaphysical form, of course. But, some people will believe it and some people won't. But I don't like it when people invalidate another person's experience. For one thing, one person has their third eye more open than another one does. Some people will never open their third eye at all. They can't deal with what's really there. But everyone's having a different experience of them because they're different. They're at a different psychic level, and their third eye is open at a different, more open than others.
I'm sorry. That's okay. I want to ask you something, and I don't want to miss the question. Could this explain how certain people, when they're out in the woods, can hear vocalizations live as opposed to other people not hearing them at all?
Yeah, It's all about vibration.
Yeah.
Once you realize that everything is about frequency and vibration, it all makes perfect sense. All of it, just like you're saying. Have you ever, like, you've advanced in your life a little bit, or you've changed your viewpoints about something, and you've kind of elevated yourself and evolved a little bit, and you realize that certain people have just kind of disappeared out of your life?
Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a vibrational thing.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, it's all vibrational.
Let's say, or let's take you, for example. You know, you were meditating a few hours a day, trying to raise up to a different frequency. How did you know that you had gotten to the point where you're like, oh, I have gotten to the point I was trying to get to?
As soon as I reached that point, oh my gosh, I was starting to think I was meditating too much. I was thinking I need to slow this down a little bit. What happened was, what really hit home for me was I went out and took my regular walk around the neighborhood. I live in a beautiful neighborhood with a creek and woods running through it and everything. So it's a nice walk. So I do that fairly often. And on one particular night, I was walking, and the bushes and the trees. Now, oh gosh, this sounds so crazy, but the bushes and the trees seemed more alive, like there were living beings everywhere. And I was just starting to see what was actually there. It was almost like I kind of reached the fifth dimension experience. And that might have been what was actually happening. I might have meditated myself into kind of a fifth dimensional frequency, or pretty close to it. But anyway, there's so many bushes and trees along the creek and everything. And I started realizing that it was full of these living beings. And I realized that they were all staring at me. And it was a very weird walk, but I was fascinated, and I was taking pictures of everything, and I was just fascinated by the whole thing. But it was just so surreal and just weird. I mean, there's probably a better word for it, but it was just very strange. And I'm like, do I need to meditate less? Is this going to be too much for me to handle? Anyway, yeah, when I got home, I was suddenly aware that there were beings in the front landscaping bushes. And I was looking at them. I was looking at these bushes, and I could see these little beings I now know to be the elementals. They have little kind of bat wing ears, kind of, and they don't hurt anything. They're just kind of there. But anyway, they were squeaking at me. And I never heard anything before like that. They were squeaking. It was like a little bird squeak almost, but it was definitely them. And I ran to the other end of my porch where there's a big cluster of bushes there. And I thought I saw something, but I wasn't sure. Something moved. And I snapped a picture really quick. Actually, several pictures. And when I went inside and got upstairs and I was looking at those pictures, there was a little female being that had been sitting there in the bushes. I couldn't see her except with the camera. She was sitting there in the bushes, and she held out her little baby for me to look at. And I've noticed all these female beings love their babies, and they're always holding them out to show them to me. They're just so proud of their babies all the time. It's so sweet. But anyway, I took a picture. She was showing me the baby, And it was pretty clearly it looked like a Bigfoot baby, but she was not big enough to be a Bigfoot. So I don't know if it was a juvenile taking care of a baby, like a juvenile female taking care of a baby, or what it was. She was showing me the baby. And it was a little black, tiny version of a Bigfoot, was what I saw in this picture. And I took another picture, and there were two legs. This whole scene with the girl and the baby had disappeared, like just in a split second. And there were two legs sticking out from under a bush. And they were the same color as the bush. And I was kind of taken aback by this whole experience because it was a lot more real to me than what had been happening previously. And I went inside, and I was kind of having a moment of PTSD where I'm like, I don't know if I can handle all this. I don't know if this is going to be too much for me or not. And that was, I would say, the moment when I realized that I had kind of accomplished what I had set out to accomplish. The only problem was I couldn't really prove it to anyone. I could show people the picture. Okay, the picture is I think it's pretty clear, but what I think is clear, other people don't think is so clear. That's the problem with the third eye thing. I show a picture to someone and it seems clear as day to me, but all they see is a bush. So this is what's frustrating about dealing with this. But once you understand vibration, how it all works, how reality actually works, it explains a lot of the reasons why people are not having the same experience of them. Because all of our minds work differently, and we're all at a different level, and we're all operating at a different vibration. So it's no wonder nobody's having the same experience, and it's leading people to gaslight each other over their experience they're having. And I can tell you it's real, but real is not what we think it is. It's not what we've been taught it is. When people ask me, people tell me that's not real. I'm like, well, define real for me, because I realize that real is, the definition of real is not what we've been taught. So you tell me what you understand to be real, and then we'll go from there.
It's such a fascinating conversation, really, if you look at the whole picture. Do you think this might explain how there were a ton of sightings in the decade of the 1970s?
The Bigfoot themselves, this is what they told me. And now other people have given other explanations because other people mind speak with them. But the thing is, every Bigfoot has their own perception of events, and every person has their own perception of events. So the story is going to be a little bit different, but basically the same. They told me that Patty, the Patterson Gimlin film, the famous Patterson Gimlin film, Patty walked down that dry creek bed that day in order to awaken some people. Now, there was an argument. People have said that she wasn't supposed to. The other Bigfoot were angry with her. She was surrounded by other Bigfoot that day. You can look in the woods in the back of some of the footage, and they're all over the woods. But anyway, she walked down that riverbed and didn't waver. She looked back to see if somebody was looking at her. She walked slowly. She walked methodically. She walked with purpose, with no real fear, all the way down that creek bed. And it was because, according to the Bigfoot themselves, that she was beginning the Great Awakening, whatever you think about that subject. But it was the Bigfoot's attempt. They are collectively trying to help the humans wake up, because we've all been, how do I want to put this? We've all been oppressed by the same beings on this planet. And they've had troubles with the people, if you want to call them people, who've been running everything and treating everybody terribly. They've treated the Bigfoot pretty terribly. They've imprisoned them, they've tortured them, they've killed them, they've done everything to them that they've done to us. And the Bigfoot are trying to help us awaken, because they know when we awaken, everything will change on this planet. Everything will get better. But they can't shock us. They can't do it in such a way that is so completely shocking that we just shut down. So when she walked down that riverbed, she was basically sending a message. We really are here. We really exist. And that's all you need to know for now, basically. And I can remember my mother dragging me into the living room to watch this. It was on In Search Of. You remember that old show, In Search Of?
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, she dragged me into the living room to show me this, because she thought I would be interested in this, curiously, because I was interested in all kinds of stuff like that. But the Bigfoot have said that that happened deliberately. That event happened deliberately. And a lot of the sightings that were full-on physical sightings in the early days were actually supposed to happen. And when you understand how reality works, when you start to study it and you understand how reality works, you realize that nothing is random. We live in a simulation. Nothing is random. Everything that happens because it's supposed to happen. How do you know that what's happening is supposed to be happening? Because it's happening. Everything is actually supposed to happen the way it does, including a Bigfoot sighting. If you see a Bigfoot, it's because you were meant to have an awakening of some sort in this lifetime. If you see them in the physical form, it's because you need to see them in the physical form, because your mind cannot handle it any other way. But like me, they knew that I did not need that, even though I have seen them that way. But they knew that I could handle the metaphysical. For whatever reason, I was capable of handling it, mainly because ever since I was really young, I was having that metaphysical experience. I just didn't even know that is what it was. So if you're supposed to have an awakening in this lifetime. Now, here's the thing. Native Americans, I can't remember which nation it was, had said that if you see a Sasquatch, it's because you are supposed to have an awakening. You're supposed to have that experience. They said that long before Patty ever walked down that riverbed. So if you see one, it's supposed to happen. Whether it scared the living daylights out of you and you can't deal with it, it was supposed to happen still. But the whole metaphysical experience is, from what I've been told by them, the whole metaphysical experience is to teach us that the metaphysical does exist, that reality exists in a different way than what we have been taught. We've been taught very narrowly about reality. What we can see is what exists, and that's all there is to it. There's way more to it. But they're trying to show us that. I asked Sarah, the one I talked to, I asked her one day, why people were starting to see them more. And I meant in the metaphysical sense. And she said this was to assist in third eye opening, which was very profound for me. It really set me on a path with the third eye and trying to figure out everything about that subject that I could. But it all plays into the big picture. Everybody's having a different experience because everybody's at different psychic levels, for lack of a better word. I don't like the word psychic. Maybe intuitive is a better word. But that's why everybody's having a different experience. And that's why the Bigfoot community is full of people constantly arguing about experiences. Like, oh, that can't be, anything can be. I was the logic person, logic and science in the beginning, and now I'm totally crazy, according to some of my friends.
Which,
But
I mean,
this,
it's a story, though, you see repeated so many times if you look through the last decades, is that people will start in the logical side and then something will happen and they will just go totally to the other side. It's almost like a switch happens.
It is.
Yeah.
Some people won't ever go there. They'll have a weird experience. They'll know there's something more to it, but they won't let themselves go there because they're so locked in logic. And this is what I was saying in the beginning about logic. They're so locked in their logic that they can't go there. They can't really fully experience this. And that's why I say logic is really kind of tripping us up here, because logic is kind of subjective. And, whatever we think is logical is what we deem to be logical. But I mean, who really decides what's logical? We have an idea in our heads what's logical, but the next person might have a totally different idea of what's logical. So logic kind of falls apart the more you pick it, the more you pick at it, the more it falls apart, because it's just way too subjective. Have you ever heard the term, like a married couple, man logic versus woman logic?
Mm-hmm.
Logical to a woman is totally illogical to a man. It's logic in the sense they understand it, but people have totally different senses of logic as individuals. So logic is it really doesn't work. I mean, when you're really trying to figure out something, if you're trying to figure out the real truth of something, you kind of have to let go of your idea of what's logical. Really. And people have fought me tooth and nail on that idea. It's like, we have to be logical no matter what. How are we going to figure out anything if we're not logical about it? I'm like, the only way to really find the truth is to just kind of let logic go. I'm not saying you should get rid of it. I think maybe exercise critical thinking, but that's another subject that's kind of, everybody's got a different idea of what critical thinking is too. So, I mean, are we going to set rules of logic, or are we just going to do what we've been doing, which is going by our own sense of logic, which doesn't match up with other people's sense of logic? Am I making sense?
No, I mean, I get it. Maybe not everyone listening is going to be on board, but I think there's definitely everyone can take different things away from this conversation. I think there's been some really interesting things said in here. So, no, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we're ever going to really figure out what reality really is, we kind of have to be open to new ideas about everything. I'm not talking about just Bigfoot, but everything. I mean, it's wide open in what we can learn from it if we just decide that not everything has to fit inside this box that we've created.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
We're really terrible about putting things in boxes, and if we just stop doing that, we're going to learn a whole A lot.
Dorrainne, it has been a fantastic chat with you, and I just want to thank you for coming on. I am going to ask, is there a way that people can reach out to you, or do you prefer to kind of be off to the side? Because I know people are going to be like, how do I get in touch with Dorrainne? So that's why I'm bringing this up.
They can reach me on my Facebook page. It's Dorrainne Fisher, and I don't know of any other Dorrainne Fisher anywhere. So I'm pretty easy to find, I think.
Okay.
It might take me a while because if they message me, it might take me a while to find their message if they're not actually a friend of mine. So, and keep in mind, I don't accept all friend requests until I've spoken to them. So, you know, I'm pretty open. I'm pretty friendly person and always willing to talk about the subject. If I get the message, I'm just saying, be patient with me if you send me a message.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I greatly appreciate it. And it's been a very enjoyable conversation today, Dorrainne.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Here at Bigfoot Society, our goal is to provide a platform for those that have encountered Bigfoot to share their encounter in a safe and respected environment. But we need to hear your story. If you've experienced something that you just can't explain, please send me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Then we can start the conversation. And I know a lot of you have not shared your encounter at all. It's been 20 years, and it's time that you get this off your chest, and then you can get some well-deserved rest, because I know you haven't been sleeping. I understand what you're going through, and I appreciate every one of you listening.
Bigfoot Society podcast, hosted by our captain, Jeremiah Byron, where it's all Bigfoot all the time. Have you ever had the urge to do more, to be more? Now you can by joining Bigfoot Society on the Patreon. Get ad-free episodes and even member-only episodes. Take part in movie night and even live video chats. Interact behind the scenes with Jeremiah and other Patreon members like me, Slaya. The powerful podcast goes on, and you may contribute a verse in our Patreon community. Carpe diem. Seize the day, Bigfooters, and make your lives extraordinary.
Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's a list. If you've had any encounters in Oregon, which I'm sure there's probably a few of you out there, please feel free to reach out immediately. You can use email bigfootsociety@gmail.com. A special thank you to all the Bigfoot Society Patreon and YouTube channel members. It's your support that helps keep the show going, and I extremely appreciate it. If you want to join in the fun, you can join over at patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. I'll see you there. And again, thanks for listening.